So Gallup did a survey in 2019 that showed 1 in 5 American adults was taking some sort of CBD.
1 in 5.
We're not talking about medical cannabis or anything like that, just CBD, retail version of CBD, the one you'd find whether it's a gas station or strip center, mall or whatever. 1 in 5 American adults. Wow. In that same survey, they found that 3 in 5 American adults said they felt like it was valid medical therapy, meaning, okay, I think this may work for something, but the 1 in 5 are doing it. 3 in 5.
I would be in the 3 in 5. Yeah. I'm not in the 1 in 5, but I'd be in the 3 in 5.
And it's because you're in great company, because a lot of people are like, well, does it work? And the reason they would maybe cross over to become a 1 in 5 or make that even higher would be recommendation from a healthcare professional.
Yeah. Welcome to the Self-Funded with Spencer podcast. Healthcare is broken, and we aim to fix it one conversation at a time. So Chad Collins, founder and CEO of CORGANICS. How are you doing, sir?
Doing great. How are you?
Great to meet you. We dove right into the story, man, and it's fascinating. I can't wait to share this on the podcast. So let's set the table for what we're going to discuss today.
Sure.
CBD, and is it safe to say clinical grade CBD is the way that you would position it?
Yeah, we like to say clinical cannabinoid therapy.
Okay. Also
known, part of it is CBD, but also there's other minor cannabinoids that are effective and outside of just CBD. That are, at least in our products.
I'll say cannabinoid. I'm glad you said it first, because I want to make sure I didn't misstate it and say it incorrectly. So I want to get into this because I think this is a fascinating sort of new frontier for the health space. Obviously, being in the insurance world, it's offering up a more innovative style solution. Hopefully, we'll talk about the efficacy and all the supporting data and all that stuff. But before we get into that, I wanted to kind of get to know you, right? To humanize you, your backstory, and also talk a little bit about the book that you're writing about your father, which you shared an intro to that, and that was fascinating. So could we start there before we get into the business side of things?
Absolutely.
So Chad, where did you grow up? You said you grew up here in Texas?
I grew up in Allen, Texas, when it was a little smaller.
Okay.
I was born in Garland, Texas, and then moved to Allen when I was 3 years old, and that would be 1976.
1976, okay. Yeah. And you said you traversed kind of the country a little bit, working after college, went to Tech, correct?
I did. I went to did undergrad at Texas Tech University, then came back here, started my career, got married right out of school to my wife, Kelly, and started in greeting cards. American Greetings. I worked for American Greeting Cards.
So I have to ask, what is it like? Is it your first job selling greeting cards? You said to like Walmart and things like that, correct? This podcast is brought to you by True Captive Insurance, a premier medical stop-loss captive for employer groups ranging from 25 to 1,000 employees. True Captive believes in healthcare that is personal and insurance that isn't complicated. That's why they take a white glove approach, making it easy for employer groups to transition into a program built specifically for them. Check them out at truecaptive.com. This podcast is sponsored by PlanSight. PlanSight is a technology for employee benefits brokers to more efficiently manage their RFP process for any group size, all funding types, and over 20 benefit lines and point solutions. PlanSight is the only end-to-end RFP technology on the market today. Let's modernize your RFP process together. Check us out at plansight.com. What's the daily life of a greeting card salesman?
Well, I had about 50 merchandisers that helped actually, pull cards and reorder cards and straighten the shelves and introduce Christmas wrapping paper, things of that nature in these stores. But it was wild and woolly, I will tell you. You've got to please a Walmart. I'll be honest with you, to please a Walmart manager, it's quite the standard that you've got to meet. Yeah. And it was probably one of the most stressful roles I've ever had, which was great. So it's been downhill from there.
It's downhill from there. It's a good trial by fire, though, right?
Trial by fire.
So what do you have anything like a company car, or we drive around town? What's your territory look like?
Luckily, I did have a little company car. I had most of Dallas-Fort Worth.
Okay.
Most of the north side of Dallas-Fort Worth. So Walmarts and at the time Eckerd Drugs and Albertsons and Targets and a number of big box retail versions of customers.
So where did the connection though come from the greeting card space to getting into healthcare, which obviously you ventured into quite a bit? Where did the interest in the healthcare space come
Well, from? Interesting enough, I grew up, my dad was a disabled veteran, and as I grew up, my dad probably had over 40 some odd major surgeries. 40? So I was fascinated. I was literally fascinated by medicine, surgical techniques and devices and pharmaceuticals that he was on. And so that always really interested me. So when I was coming out of college, that really was my aim, was to eventually get in healthcare if possible. And luckily got a call from a recruiter one day, said, would you be interested in interviewing with, at the time, a small company, which now is one of the top 5 pharma companies in the world, Sanofi Pharmaceuticals. So that started it.
So, I mean, did you jump at that chance? I mean, was this taking you out of the greeting card world, or was there anything in between? Okay.
Yeah, that was taking me. I went straight from the greeting cards at Walmart as an example, and within a couple of weeks, I'm in the OR in open heart surgery, actually watching open heart surgery. So it was a pretty big transition, and a great learning curve for sure, which was fascinating. I loved it.
And how long did you do the pharmaceutical sales world?
Well, I did the role of a rep for about 2.5 years, and then I was fortunate, worked for a great company that was growing and was great at development of people and leaders. And so I became a manager at that point, moved from Dallas to Houston, and became a manager of a team out of Houston.
And then, so the evolution, you know, obviously we won't have a chance to go through the entire career, but kind of the evolution to get to this space. I mean, obviously you've gravitated more towards, I would say, less of the pharmaceutical side and more towards what would you consider your, the CBD world, if you will? Because I know it's in this gray area of categorization.
No, it's a great question. Luckily for me, I've been very fortunate. I've worked in leadership, senior leadership in pharmaceuticals, medical device, was Stryker, and then also was the CEO of a specialty pharmacy company. And so all of those really exposed me to all specialties. I mean, literally from orthopedics to oncology to dermatology, you name it. I've been very fortunate to play in a lot of different spaces. When I was at Sanofi Pharmaceuticals, my co-founder and I, Reggie Gatewood, we actually were on a project that worked for Sanofi on how do we prep the market for products that are cannabinoid therapy based products. And so then, even over a decade ago, I was getting exposure to what would be what we are seeing now, which is the explosion of CBD or cannabinoid therapy. But what's coming is even bigger and broader and even better from a prescription standpoint. So we had some inside knowledge, if you will, of working from a pharmaceutical standpoint, which brought credibility to it. And then a few years ago, was approached by some folks in private equity that were really, really interested in nobody's really owning the healthcare space, right? So you've got the wild west of retail CBD out there, less regulation than we were accustomed to in pharma. They were, you can find it in a gas station. CBD is an example in a gas station to a head shop to you name it, in a strip center or Amazon. So, but the problem was you don't know actually what's in those products for the most part. And a lot of the retail versions of CBD, they cut corners. They're not transparent. They may have heavy metals or pesticides, and you may not know it. But you're looking for something more safer and more natural also. So,
well, yeah, and I told you, we were talking off camera right there, being an ex-college athlete myself and all the regulation around drugs and drug use and drug testing and things like that. There's concerns, I would presume, for a college athlete or even a professional athlete that what else is in this CBD that I'm taking, right? Is it tainted with something that would make me fail a drug test unknowingly, right? Also, they jeopardize my eligibility or I get suspended. So that would be a big fear, especially if I was still in a competitive space, right? Worrying about, well, yeah, I want to use this for sleep or for pain, but what happens if I accidentally pop on a drug test, right?
Yeah, you're spot on. So our research shows that most American adults actually don't want THC in a product. And that could be for a couple of reasons. One, they just don't want the psychoactive effect of THC in a product. The second would be their career. You know, if you're a professional athlete or an Olympic athlete or a first responder or a healthcare professional or an American Airlines pilot, you can't risk having THC in a product. And unfortunately, in the retail space today, because a lot of them don't do the really the quality of testing and third-party testing that's really what they should be doing. Sometimes you may be getting something that's mislabeled. It may say it doesn't have THC, but the reality is it may have THC.
It may.
And
even trace amounts. I mean, I don't know what the threshold is, right, on these drug tests, right? If there's trace amounts, even it could potentially
we call it detectable THC.
Okay.
So, in fact, the Leaf report was a recent third-party audit that looked at over around 3,000 products. So they randomly took some of the largest retail versions of CBD, both online, like through Amazon or off store shelves. They third-party tested these products. All of the products said they had no THC in them, yet 21% did. Mm-hmm. We're talking about 3,000 products from extremely reputable brands, reputable meaning people know these brands. Mm-hmm. And that is a scary thought. So if you're a professional athlete down the street here, Dallas Cowboy, or you're a truck driver or anybody that potentially could get drug tested, that's why a company like CORGANICS is so valuable in the market, because you don't have to worry about things. So there's different certifications and quality measures and controls that you can put in place that to almost literally ensure that a patient wouldn't inevitably get a product that's tainted or has detectable THC.
And that's because there isn't FDA regulation, correct?
That's correct. Okay. So there's
Is it treated like a supplement then, like the supplement world, like creatine or something to that effect, where there isn't regulation, but it's sort of incumbent upon the manufacturer or the retailer to actually disclose what's in it?
That's exactly right. Okay. Yeah. So there's lack of regulatory controls right now in the retail setting. So like a CORGANICS, my co-founder Reggie Gatewood and I, we come from the pharma industry, mm-hmm. right? So we understand working with the FDA. We understand what's expected of a pharmaceutical-like product, whether it's prescription or not, and what the regulatory environment looks like. So putting the quality controls from the very get-go to something we would deliver to patients is very important to us. And so we spend a lot of time. So I'll give you a couple of examples. So, a product should come through and be manufactured in an FDA approved and regulated facility. So it should be registered with the FDA where it's getting audited. Mm-hmm. It should have quality controls like CGMP. So the operations.
That to me. What does that mean?
Well, that's auditing everything. Does it have clean rooms? How clean is this process from start to finish? And then for us, we think very important to be certified for sport, because that's called NSF, or safe for sport, which is any supplement that an Olympic athlete or professional athlete takes. If it's a supplement, they really need to make sure it's NSF safe for sport, right? And so you have facilities that go through a significant amount of rigor to basically be the filter for, in our world, it's no THC. There's no THC because that's a banned substance. So if you're in the retail market of CBD, you should be looking, is this an FDA certified facility that it's coming from? Is it certified for sport or safe for sport? Mm-hmm. If you know you have those quality measures in place, then you're most likely going to get a much safer, cleaner product.
And so what is the governing bodies of the Olympic Committee and the NCAA, what is their stance on CBD today?
Yeah, they most don't recommend it, because what they know right now is retail version of CBD, right?
But explicitly the CBD category itself,
or cannabis.
Cannabis.
Yeah.
Okay, so could I be an athlete if I'm using a clean product? Mm-hmm. Could I use CBD and not be in jeopardy of losing eligibility or suspension? Or
I can't answer for all all the other 1,000 retail versions of CBD. I can say like CORGANICS. In our involvement. In fact, we have professional athletes and Olympic athletes across the country on our products. Even here locally, the ones that wear the star on the helmet, several of them are on our products, and chronically for multiple reasons, because they and their healthcare professionals have found us to be safe. Even if you look on our products as an example, we've got a QR code on every one of them that takes you to a third-party test of every single batch of our products. And you're going to know, far more detail than you would probably want to know, but 70 different pesticides that we look for, heavy metals. And unfortunately, I was mentioning that Leaf report, they found of those 3,000, only 4% actually tested for heavy metals.
Okay.
Side note, but we just we are doing a partnership with the largest oncology group in the country. So you think about oncologists and physicians and pharmacists that are dealing with cancer patients, the last thing they can have in their system is heavy metals or pesticides or anything that could negatively affect and could be toxic for that patient population for sure. But they're looking for those certifications that we talked about, the transparency, that things of that nature. And so we think that's important.
Yeah, I want to go back in time a little bit. I want to get into the usefulness, the efficacy, obviously the data that you're getting into, the application of this. I think is going to be fascinating, and I think that's how we'll sort of control the meat of this conversation. But going back to that moment where you guys were approached by private equity, what was it about the space at that time that was so intriguing to them? Obviously, the opportunity to make money, but why that time and why you guys? I want to hear a little bit about that part of the story.
Yeah, that's a great question. So because Reggie and I have worked, and our entire team comes from pharma or medical device. So we understand healthcare professionals and their world. We understand their language. We understand their pain points. We understand their treatment options that they have for their patients, that sort of thing. One of the things that we did in our due diligence was asked literally physicians that we knew across the country, are you being asked about CBD from your patients? And literally at that time, this is 2.5+ years ago, 9 out of 10 said, yeah, I'm actually being asked about it. And we say, well, what do you say? And they say, well, I don't know exactly what to say. I would just tell them to be careful. Well, if you knew that you had a cleaner, safer, more transparent product and that is clinically proven, and we'll talk about being clinically proven in a minute, would that change your approach in your conversations with patients? Again, 9 out of 10, 9.5 would say, yeah, absolutely. I want one that I can recommend to my patients. They were realizing, and those healthcare professionals were realizing, patients were already in America starting to look for safer, cleaner, natural alternatives to prescriptions.
Yes.
So you've got a lot of patients out there, they don't want surgery as the first option. They want to try other things. And the same thing goes on the pharmaceutical side. A lot of folks don't want to necessarily go to a prescription right away. That could be opioids, sedatives, anxiolytics, things of that nature that they feel like, could I maybe address my modality, my issue with something a little cleaner and safer first, at least?
It's the concept of step therapy in the drug world, right? Where you start with the least impactful, if you will, or maybe the safest drug first, correct? So
that's exactly
right. Is this seen as that first step often then with the physicians now? Or is this after some very basic, very safe, long-standing generic would be tried first or in conjunction? I'm curious the order of operations here.
Yeah, well, I think as healthcare professionals, so if you go back in time, most healthcare professionals didn't necessarily learn about the endocannabinoid system. So we've got these CB1, CB2 receptor sites all over our body, literally from our skin to the brain to every organ and everywhere in between. They didn't learn a whole lot about it, very small amounts. Now they're starting to understand it. There's so much from even before pharma gets here with all those patents and prescription products. What you're going to see is a training and education revolution around the endocannabinoid system, or ECS.
ECS.
Is what we
I'll say
call
ECS,
it in pharma.
just make it a little simpler. Yeah.
So what's going to happen is within the next few years, we're all going to wake up and we're probably going to hear a commercial on TV that says, hey, Spencer, you need to think about your endocannabinoid system. Your ECS is very effective in helping your body reach balance and you name the disease state, A to Z. And pharma is the one who's going to really push that. So there's going to be, it'll continue. Healthcare providers and professionals are already becoming more accustomed to hearing about it. They're learning more. So you can't go to a medical conference today, no matter whether it's oncology, orthopedics, family practice, dermatology, plastic surgery, you name it. They're talking about cannabinoid therapy for a number of different reasons within each specialty. And so they're learning about all this already peer-reviewed data out there that supports the use of even the basics of CBD for a lot of different things.
I have like 1,000 different questions I want to ask you.
Yeah.
I want to make sure that the conversation flows really well. But I want to make sure I understand your decision as a distribution channel, right? I think that's very interesting that it's not a prescription, it's not retail, it's this in-between state that you can only access CORGANICS through physicians, correct?
That's
so
correct.
Explain me the approach to that, the why about that, and then if I'm a patient that is interested, right, what are the steps in order to perhaps source it?
Yeah, so a lot of levels to that question.
I'm pretty good at that or bad. It depends on your perspective, right? I add some layers of complexity to the question.
Well, so going back when it kind of hit our radar, and you have to remember, so Reggie Gatewood and I, our background, having worked on a major project for a big major pharmaceutical company in this space, was very important because we had context.
Okay.
We knew what was potentially coming down the road. We also knew where our expertise lied. It was quality products, launching products, but it was also education of healthcare professionals, working with them on, and we had been in different buy and bill spaces before as well. So we may have products that would be bought by a professional, healthcare professional, and sold to patients. So we've had that experience. So we knew that how do we create an ecosystem around the healthcare professional? So first, let's help educate them and their practice around the ECS.
Okay.
How do we give them patient education literature? How do we also build marketing resources? But then at the end of the day, how do we deliver them the highest quality, cleanest, safest, transparent, and clinically proven products so that now they could get in that conversation and be better in that conversation.
And feel, I would say, confident, their reputation,
100%.
That things like that, right? So as these physicians are learning this new space and they're determining whether or not to make these recommendations, of course, they're thinking about probably things like malpractice or what is my patient going to think. So I'm curious that process for them to come around to it.
Yeah, the exciting thing there was patients were actually ahead of the healthcare professional
because they were bringing it to the doctors.
They're asking the healthcare professional what are their thoughts, and fortunate or unfortunate, what was happening in the market would be Aunt Sally told me that these gummies down the street helped her with her aching arthritic knees or whatever the case is. Uncle John said that he had benefit for sleep with this product. They have no idea what they're getting, but they're asking healthcare professionals. Now the healthcare professional is sitting there. If they're more confident in understanding the science behind cannabinoid therapy, if they already have a patient that is already basically expressing, I would rather try something like CBD as an example or cannabinoid therapy prior to something else. Now you've really got the perfect storm. And so that's what we recognized is our expertise was working with healthcare professionals, launching products through education, and helping support their practice with pull-through, if you will.
Okay.
And that's been, it's been phenomenal for us. So we started the company a little over 2 years ago, about 2.5 years ago with the formation of the company. We launched product into the market about a year ago.
Okay.
We went through a major raise of capital. A lot of people excited about this space and us because CORGANICS is so unique that because of all that expertise versus the retail version. So to end that kind of question for you with an answer around why do we think that's important, we want to support that. We think we can bridge the gap between the physician and their patient. Both are interested in this area. So how can we help bridge the gap in that communication so that patient gets access to a cleaner, safer product? Physician is able to feel confident about it because they have more understanding. Plus, we have clinical data, which is not the norm in retail versions of CBD.
Well, so how do you draw, I guess, how do you compartmentalize, I'm a physician, now I'm selling a product in my practice, right? Is there any sort of skepticism about, was my provider incentivized?
Sure.
So I'm sure that question comes up from time to time. So how do you position that?
Yeah. So I think, but dependent upon the specialty, we also allow them to, we actually commercialize in two different ways. One is we will sell an inventory into certain practices that want to have an inventory. Maybe they're used to maybe an orthopedic group that they already sell knee braces and ice packs and ice machines, and they already are retailing things in their practice. What they say is, look, we think this is an alternative our patients are already interested in. We are the ones that have vetted the highest quality. And if they'd like access as an option, they can purchase it through us.
Okay.
And then they can determine where their price point is, right? And so what we usually see is the price point of even our products are less than what you would see in the retail space for definitely subpar quality or safety in our eyes. And so then we also have some practices that literally just do it as a pass-through. They say, you know what, we don't really care to make any money on it. We just want to ensure the safety of our patients and that they're getting a higher quality, safer product. And then we also, so we commercialize through inventory, but we also have an opportunity for healthcare groups, practices, or organizations. They're even like health and wellness benefit plans, things of that nature. It's been vetted through healthcare, but they want their patients to have access to it if they like. They can then acquire it on our website as long as they have a code and it's been vetted through whatever that healthcare channel is.
Okay.
And so
I definitely want to go down the employer route. I think that's going to be interesting. Before we do that, I do want to talk about the actual use of CBD itself, right? So, as I don't want to say a newbie, if you will, I've not myself tried it. I know plenty of people that have. I understand the basics are the sleep, pain mitigation, maybe stress, things like that. What are the most common? Did I hit some of the top three?
Yeah, probably literally the most common reasons why adults in the U.S. self-treat is pain, sleep, and anxiety.
Anxiety, okay.
And stress related to that. And then inflammation. You'll see even more about this from a skin inflammation standpoint. In the dermatology world's very, very interested in cannabinoid therapy, both treating it topically and systemically. So taking an oral product as well. So those are the primary reasons that people just self-treat. If you think about America, we've got a lot of pain, we've got a lot of sleep issues and stress, and that's even accelerated since the pandemic, right? So Gallup did a survey in 2019, pre-pandemic, that showed 1 in 5 American adults was taking some sort of CBD.
1 in 5.
We're not talking about medical cannabis or anything like that, just retail version of CBD, the one you'd find whether it's a gas station or strip center, mall or whatever. 1 in 5 American adults. In that same survey, they found that 3 in 5 American adults said they felt like it was valid medical therapy, meaning, okay, I think this may work for something.
Sure.
But the 1 in 5 are doing it. 3 in 5.
I would be in the 3 and 5. I'm not in the 1 and 5, but I'd be in the 3 and 5.
And it's because you're in great company, because a lot of people are like, well, does it work? And the reason they would maybe cross over to become a 1 in 5 or make that even higher would be recommendation from a healthcare professional. If my healthcare professional, you name it, whether it's my primary care physician to an oncologist, to name the specialty, if I know that they believe that it potentially can work and there's validity to it, I'm going to do it.
Yeah, I'm a data guy, so I'm kind of like, show me the data, right?
That's exactly right.
But I like this as a potential alternative, like you were saying, too. I mean, you can think about the most common things that we self-medicate with, right? Alcohol is a very common one. Obviously, people are using the THC version of marijuana. Right. There's obviously other prescription medications. All of them have very real and very tangible side effects and downsides to doing it. I'm even a guy that, like, now I'm about to be 40 this year. If I have a glass of wine, oftentimes I'll wake up with a headache. It's almost like I don't have, if you will, a very obvious way to deal with work stress. And so whether it's through exercise, it's kind of been my choice because it feels like the healthiest alternative, but that's also, there's a lot of physical exertion and time with that as well. And that's what is part of what stimulated this conversation. I just keep hearing so much about it. You can't drive anywhere in North Texas and not see a CBD pop up, or at least a retail pop up that has CBD. So I'm going, well, what is it about this? Why is this happening? All happening now? I do want to go into the employer world, because I think that will be really fascinating. Is how could we get this done at scale, right? Because if you're going through the channel of a physician, I'm a person, a patient, an employee that has to get it through my doctor. How does it become scalable? How does a self-funded employer put this onto the plan as an option as well. I'd love to hear what your thoughts are around that space.
Yeah, absolutely. I think even before we get to the employer piece, you've even got these really large group practices in the U.S. that are bringing CORGANICS into their organization. I'll give you an example. I won't name their name yet because we haven't put out the PR press release yet, but literally the largest oncology group in the U.S. Is bringing on our products as their exclusive CBD and cannabinoid therapy. I say cannabinoid therapy with us because we also have other minor cannabinoids in our products that make them that much more effective. Instead of just isolated, just CBD. So our products are very effective, and I'll talk a little bit about our IRB approved studies in a minute. But to your point, the larger and the being able to scale, you need these large groups that really believe in it, one, and I think that gives a lot of credibility to employer groups. So if I'll use American Airlines or what you name, a big organization like that has thousands and thousands of employees, if they look at what they're spending in drug utilization right now, whether it's opioids, anxiolytics, and sedatives with their patients, it is extremely high cost.
Yeah.
Right. And knowing that in America, most American adults are trying to go, okay, can I try something else? I just don't know what that else is before going to a prescription, right? And so I think in these health and wellness benefit plans that are usually either scrutinized or vetted, everything within it's vetted by healthcare professionals. I think there's an opportunity there to integrate something like our CORGANICS clinical CBD that is cleaner and safer, at least providing access, because a lot of patients, before they make that jump, because the reality, Spencer, is in the U.S. today, everybody knows about the opioid epidemic, right? And so you've got much more volume of patients very cognizant about the issues related to it. We probably all know somebody that had a surgery, had an injury, had some reason that they started an opioid, and for very valid reasons. Not they were maybe really were hurt or had surgery, but they took it 1 or 2 days longer than they probably needed to, and then they're addicted.
Yep.
And then the spiral happens, and more injuries, more surgeries, more reasons to try to get more product. And here, as an employer, you're paying for that. And then you're paying for addiction services. You're paying for, it goes beyond the actual just the prescription.
Effect of the use of those drugs.
And then if you look at the productivity, if I'm an employer, which I am an employer of folks, we look at productivity. We want our patients, our employees, I call them patients. We're all patients to some degree, but you want them to be more productive. Usually they're more productive if they're not having to deal with as much pain or sleep issues or anxiety and stress. They're just more productive. They're at work more. They're more engaged. And so if there are a lot of folks that are finding value in this very safe, clean, and much less expensive alternative to prescriptions, it's a win-win for the employer. It's a win-win for the patient.
Right now, though, but to get it covered, right, it's got to be more through like a wellness style plan with a voucher. This isn't necessarily on my prescription card, my ID card. There's not a $5 copay for this model, right? So it fits in this gray area today, correct?
Yeah, and to be honest with you, if you think about what the American adult today is doing, there are millions of patients spending billions of dollars on CBD, and I'll just classify it as CBD.
What is the kind of total market?
Well, right now this year it'll probably reach about $10 billion spent in retail, and it's in the next 2.5-3 years. It's supposed to be around 17 or 18 billion.
Okay.
So it's not going anywhere.
No, it's definitely not. Yeah.
And then you're going to have the prescriptions and all of that are very costly, but in this setting, patients are already accustomed to spending a lot of money on CBD, even, like I said, subpar, maybe unsafe, and maybe have detectable THC, all of that. And so there's an opportunity to lower cost, but patients are already doing it, right? So it's either I can see an employer either supplementing and or just providing their patients access to a product like ours that's been vetted through their healthcare team, and then letting them purchase it at a discount versus even going directly to all the individual doctors or groups around the country that have us in the practice, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And so is
From an
there
access standpoint.
an opportunity for, because I know virtual primary care is becoming a big part of this world. So can I virtually get access to, or an endorsement of my doctor to be able to access this? And then do I have to come into his or her practice to actually purchase it, though, correct? But you might be able to have a conversation about the usefulness or the need of it over the phone instead of coming in person.
That's exactly right.
Okay.
Yeah, I think there's different mechanisms, right? So if it's been vetted by healthcare through an organization, as an example, so your healthcare professionals that work on a health and wellness benefit plan say, you know what, we wouldn't mind our patients having access to this, even if the patient is the one paying out of pocket, because inevitably it may keep them from going down the path of other prescriptions and help with productivity just by giving them access. They can then come to our website, purchase it directly with the code from that employer and wellness benefit, and we will drop ship it directly to the patient.
Okay. I like that a lot. Yeah.
So we make it extremely flexible and easy for the healthcare professional if it's going through that setting or if it's going through a health and wellness benefit plan of an employer. Either way, it's been vetted. That's the key. It's been vetted by healthcare. We are literally, we would say we are the most trusted clinical CBD on the market for sure. We're one of the only companies that literally goes directly through healthcare providers only. And healthcare organizations only. You won't find us on Amazon. You won't find us unfortunately, you won't find us in big box retail pharmacies. And again, it goes back to, we want it vetted through healthcare professionals. We value healthcare professional conversations with patients, and or at least that patient knowing healthcare provider or my wellness and benefits package includes access to this product, whether it's paid for by the employer or the employee. Really, to us, it doesn't really matter.
Well, so I want to be careful, right? Because I always want to be objective in these conversations and don't want to position it as a total panacea for everything. So what does this not do, right? Or what are potential, if any, relevant side effects that should be discussed?
Sure. I think in general, from a side effect profile, cannabinoid therapy is seen as a very mild or I'll call it benign, literally benign, because it's natural. Right? It doesn't really interfere with other drug-to-drug interactions, things of that nature. So there's never been, at least we've never seen or anything recorded around any kind of overdosing from CBD, as an example. So that's one. I think it's safe. Now, if you don't want THC, then you need to make sure your product doesn't have THC because of the things we talked about earlier.
But is there any sort of thing, even just general, I'm groggy if I took it the night before when I slept, or didn't get enough sleep, so I'm a little groggy when I woke? I mean, presumably there's things that are reported, right? They're even benign, that's still to consider, correct?
Yeah, I think in general in the retail versions, when you don't know what you're getting, because there could be a little THC in it when you didn't think so it made you sleepy or whatever. I can tell you what ours has shown, and we have IRB approved studies with over 500 patients through UCLA and Johns Hopkins and University of Washington that showed they didn't report grogginess or sleepiness, or they were completely of sound mind. So there was zero of that, and I think that goes back just to the quality piece. For sure. So that's a real positive. I think the reason even like the oncology group is excited about bringing us on is because there aren't the side effect issues that you see with other things. In fact,
that's
it may modify.
Draw to me. Yeah, I mean, the obvious draw is even if the side effect profile is benign, right? Everything you put in your body has, to some degree, a side effect, even food and things like that. But, I know you want to really make sure the space has that credibility element to it. So do you see people in the retail world making all sorts of unsubstantiated claims as to what it can do, which you just kind of scoff at or roll your eyes at?
Yes. At first, the FDA doesn't, you're really not allowed to make any claims, right? Until you actually have an indication as proven to the FDA. which then would allow prescription make it a prescription product, right? So in our world, that's why you'll never see, like CORGANICS, we can't make claims, but what we can do is share our specific data.
Okay.
So you'll never see on a website or any material or anything like that that we say, oh, well, it helps with COVID.
Yeah.
The inflammatory cascade of the lungs with COVID, and we help that.
Yeah.
We can't make a claim of that, so we never will.
Okay.
Now, healthcare professionals, they're able to go, okay, now I understand the mechanism of action. I understand CB1, CB2 receptor sites and how cannabinoid therapy impacts our ECS. A healthcare professional can connect those dots all they want.
Okay.
They may say, look, I want to use this in lieu of or instead of another product, even a prescription after surgery, as an example. CORGANICS can't make that claim. No CBD company can make that claim that this is as effective as an opioid after surgery. Now, physicians, they can certainly make that claim because their own personal experience with their patients, right? So I think that's where you have to be very, very careful. If you're seeing claims being made,
regrow your hair, right?
Yeah,
or something like that.
We're a huge skeptic. We come from Pharma,
Yeah,
right? So Reggie and I come from Pharma, so we understand what we can say and what we can't say. What we can say is we know cannabinoid therapy impacts the ECS, and we know what the ECS does inside our body, right? And so we help educate around that, and that's why it's interesting for Pharma. That's why they're all coming after this space, is the utility. Because you hear a zillion different things. And the reality is a lot of it is true.
Yeah.
There's already a lot of peer-reviewed data that says CBD or cannabinoid therapy works for X, Y, and Z. And there's real validity to that. And that's why it's important, even for a company like ours, to do what we call IRB-approved studies. So these independent review boards that are developed, they have to vet the quality and third-party test all of your products anyway. If we say that we don't have THC, they're going to have to say improve that as well. So to be even included in an IRB-approved study, it's a significant barrier of entry. And then you work with research centers around the world, or in our case in the U.S., that we said, look, design a study that best reflects what's really going on in the U.S. So pain, sleep, and anxiety being the three largest reasons people self-treat with CBD today. And so we wanted to look at those. So they start looking at inclusion criteria for patients. Have patients been clinically diagnosed with pain, sleep, or anxiety, or a combination of all three? And so, like for us, an investment in that is very important, because it's easy for me to sit here and say, hey, Spencer, our CBD is better than their CBD. Unless I had IRB-approved studies to actually be able to say that, I can't say that, right? So that investment is very important to us. So we're investing in a lot of different research in different specialties. But that particular one was game-changing for us, because we looked at over 500 patients. So not 5 patients down the street and did a survey. There was very specific measurements of pain, sleep, and anxiety that are kind of the gold standard if you're a pain medicine physician. You're going to use PEG-3 as one of the things to determine what the level of pain is for that patient. And it's real, right? PROMIS is the one in sleep. And then GAD-7, generalized anxiety disorder, number 7, is one that's probably the most used or gold standard in anxiety. And so those measurements were used every week over the course of a month with our products, over the course of those 500 patients. And luckily for us, it came back positive, right? So we were 64% improvement in pain, 53% improvement in sleep, and 63% improvement in anxiety over the course of a month. So if you're a patient and you have any of those modalities, you at least now have something concrete that somebody could say, well, here's 500 patients that had some of the similar diagnosis that I do. And it actually worked.
Well, again, with a relatively, obviously, overwhelmingly benign side effect profile, the downside risk is pretty low, if almost non-existent, right?
And I'll add one other thing. I didn't even mention in those, but they also looked at overall well-being, wellness and well-being. that is this feeling of, okay, I just feel better. So it may be a combination of all those things, but it was a 66% improvement in overall well-being over the course of a month. So if I'm an employer, okay, so going back to employees with their employer, if my employees are walking in the door and they have a 66% improvement of anything, that's looked at pretty positively. So if they feel better, they're probably going to be that much more engaged in their employment. They're probably going to be a better employer or employee. So I think we thought that was very insightful.
This is an intriguing space for me. I mean, I wouldn't have reached out to you proactively to talk to you because I was at least intrigued by what I could discern from the website, and I'm glad I did because this is fascinating to me. My interest has been piqued. I would be remiss if we didn't discuss the book, though. I do want to take a moment, and maybe we'll end with that. But I would love, since you shared that with me, I got to read the intro. And by the way, you're a very good writer. I don't know if you have a background in it or have experience, but you're a very good writer. But I would love to share what your goals are with the book, your father's story a little bit, and just talk generally about that before we wrap up the show.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Spencer. So I'd mentioned I grew up here in Dallas, and I grew up, my parents are unbelievable, Rick and Linda Collins, and my dad, who passed away about a year and a half ago, was such a unique human being. He lost his legs in Vietnam, severe injury, shot twice through the shoulder, and he had an amazing life outside of just that. Even growing up, there are some unique stories that we'll talk about in this book. The book is called Run to the Fire. Run to the Fire. And there's an event in my life when I was 5 years old that's why the book's based off of that title. But very uniquely, my dad was hurt significantly. My dad had been married to his first wife, which was his high school sweetheart. They had a little boy. And after my dad got severely hurt, even had contracted malaria through blood transfusions, survived, came back to the States, was at Brooke Army Hospital in San Antonio at Fort Sam Houston for almost a year recovering. They told him he would never walk again. Right. And he said, well, I'm going to walk. I used to be a great athlete at Mesquite High School, linebacker, running back, and football is very important in this book as well. Okay. But he comes back and 6 months later, he's in a car accident and goes back in now the VA hospital of Dallas for 6 months in a body cast. My goodness. Gets out, and about 3 months later, unfortunately, his wife, his son, and his mother-in-law are killed in a car accident. So all of this happens. So a year, get hurt in Vietnam, a year in the hospital, out for 6 months, back in the hospital for 6 months, and then immediately after, you lose all your hope, if you will, in your little son and his first wife and his mother-in-law. And somehow he gets himself back up through a lot of faith, and faith was very important, but gets up, meets my mom. And the premise of the story, if you will, so there's all of that, is I'm 5, and I'll give you the short clip of being a 5-year-old with my little sister in the back seat. This was back when we actually could ride in the front seat, no car seats, and no actual seatbelt. Sitting between my parents, we're on a country road, and there's a fire up ahead. It's a car that's engulfed in flames. Yeah. And as we get up close to it, fear hits me of like crazy, not knowing what I'm seeing. My dad tells my mom and I, go get help. And so my mom is literally grabbing my sister, and there's a house a couple of 100 yards away. I see my dad, who's an amputee, who walks on crutches, by the way, literally run to that fire. And I'm crying. Watching this. We run. My mom's banging on a door. It's about 10 o'clock at night. Call 911. We run back, and my dad has literally pulled this teenage girl about 50 yards, about a half football length of field, away from this fire. Wow. And miraculously, she's unconscious. The paramedics get there. They revive her. Okay. She lives. She's off to the hospital. That's just one story of running to the fire for my dad. And so here you are, you've been disabled, you've lost, people in your life that meant everything to you, and somehow you are able to run to the fire and not think about yourself. And so he lived a life of service. He and my mom lived a life of service. And there's so many wonderful stories about being able to get back up and persevere and figuring out ways that you can serve others even when you're going through such adversity. So my dad had 40 some odd surgeries, I mentioned. And so that's another reason why I'm in the space that I'm in.
I believe it.
Because I care about people. I care about patients. How can we develop something that patients will benefit from? So I'm really excited. I'm almost finished with the book. We'll probably launch in October.
In October, okay.
So that'll be the launch plan is October. So hopefully people will find that book, Run to the Fire.
I mean, just reading the intro and even hearing you retell the story, I mean, it's almost unbelievable the amount of adversity that your father went through. And you said he just recently passed. So how old was he when he passed?
He was 72.
72 years old. My goodness.
So he went 50 years without being in a wheelchair. So he defied the odds. Doctor said, he said, I'm not going to be in a wheelchair. And unfortunately, a lot of times what happens to somebody when all of a sudden they become sedentary, finally we convinced him to go to a wheelchair.
Okay.
It was a nice, fancy, fast wheelchair, by the way.
Yeah.
So thank you to the VA for that wheelchair. But he had a clot that went to his lungs and he died suddenly. But he lived such an incredible life and made a difference to so many other veterans in how he would counsel people and how he lived his life. He was an amazing role model. So a lot of the proceeds from this book will go to working right now on some national causes, but also here locally as well in the DFW market that'll help veterans. So we want to take some of the proceeds and really help veteran causes. And so if you purchase a book, read this book, share it with others, we want to be able to get it out to the masses so that we can help as many people as possible.
Well, I absolutely want to read it. So please let me know when it is fully published and when where I can access it, and be happy to help promote it and share. I have some contacts in that world as well that you described. So hopefully we can help spread the message. But I want to read that story.
Yeah.
The story just as described and summarized briefly I'm sure is going to be fascinating. And I'm sure for you, cathartic to be able to share a story with the world as well.
No question.
So I appreciate this, Chad. This was absolutely a pleasure, just personally and hopefully as well, obviously professionally, when we get this episode out. But thank you so much for sitting down with me, and I look forward to sharing this with the world here soon.
Well, thanks, Spencer. I enjoyed it, and thank you for sharing your stories and your podcast with others. You're doing great work, and it's a pleasure to meet you finally personally.
Yeah, likewise, man. I appreciate it. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks, Chad.
Okay, thanks.
Bye. True Captive believes in healthcare that is personal and insurance that isn't complicated. Check them out at truecaptive.com.